Hello citizens of the multiverse and welcome to Dark Knight Nation. Today we're going to be discussing a very special issue, and that is Robin's 80th Anniversary Spectacular, written by an assortment of writers and drawn by an assortment of artists. This book essentially contains a series of anthology stories by creators who at some point have impacted the Robin character, whether or not it's Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, Jason Todd, so on. Overall, I think that this book was definitely worth the price of admission. Between all of the really cool covers, decade variants, and a couple of really good stories inside, I'd recommend this to anybody that has any sort of tie or affinity to the Robin mantle, for sure. Please make sure if you enjoy this video to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more content, and comment down below answering the question of the day. Doing all of those things will also get you one step closer to winning a free copy of this Robin 80th Anniversary book for yourself physically. I will mail it to you free of coronavirus. Too soon? Okay, moving on. But that's all courtesy of my sponsor AJ's Comics in Colchester, Connecticut. And we will be able to do the giveaway if this video hits 30 likes. I don't know why I held up 3 fingers, but 30 likes in the first 3 days. So with all of the plugging out of the way, the stories I'm going to be talking about today are my favorites that came out of this big anthology book. And yeah, we're just going to go through them and highlight the stuff that I thought worked, the stuff that might not have. So with that being said, let's get into it. I do quickly want to preface this by saying that all of these stories are very short, anthology style, so they're between 8 to 10 pages. Not to mention, I will only be summarizing them down to the most essential story beats. So if you feel like you're missing out on something, please make sure to go pick up the book and support your local comic book store during these crazy times. Some of you might be surprised to note that my 5th favorite story in this book is The Lesson Plan by Tom King, Tim Seeley, and Mikhail Yanin. So this story takes place with Dick Grayson back during his time as an agent of Spiral, and he's on a mission with a student of his to recover a promethium isotope from a band of thieves. And along the way, Dick recalls lessons from his mentor and deliberately contradicts them while instructing her, and those scenes are juxtaposed along the main thrust of the contemporary plot of this story. What this is really meant to do is articulate how different Dick Grayson is from Bruce Wayne Batman at his core. The execution, however, comes off as a bit petulant at times. The story closes with Dick Grayson and his student eventually finding the promethium in use by a sentient gorilla from Gorilla City, powering up some big doomsday weapon. And really, the plot here is entirely negligent. What we want to pay attention to are the juxtapositions of Batman's teachings from Dick Grayson's actual actions. And there was one in particular that I thought really hit home at these characters' core differences and highlighted them very, very well. And it was at a point where Dick recollects Batman telling him that his anger and his rage at the people who took his parents from him is his strength, and punishment kind of being one of the big engines behind doing what he does. Whereas Dick finds grace in saving people just by the nature of knowing that he's doing the right thing and he's providing a level of goodness to somebody. The rest of these juxtapositions, however, are what comes off as really petulant. It starts off by Bruce making point at being, calculated, whereas Dick just kind of jumps. And another moment where Batman in the past reminds Dick to use the shadows and darkness as a tool, whereas Dick just kind of jumps out 10 feet away from people with guns and says hello before, not getting shot, because comics. And I think that ultimately what really brought the story down for me, because I'm quite a fan of the Grayson years, but I don't think that thematically the execution was there. One thing to remember about these anthology stories is that they're not really about plot. Plot is irrelevant. What the intent should be for creators coming into a big celebration anthology style story is to do something that ties intrinsically into the character and pushes something either about them or about their impact on the world around them. And I think King and Seeley get a good start on it, but don't really follow through super well. Out of the 4 or 5 examples of Batman juxtaposed lessons, there was really only 1 or 2 that I felt were executed properly, where when the story ends, the main thrust was that Batman says, and at the end of the day, ignore everything I'm saying and be you because that's what makes you special. And that is very strong, but again, it does get really held back by how objective Dick seems to be about taking any of Batman's teachings, and in a way I think it makes him a little bit pestilent and mischaracterizes him, because although he is very different from Batman, there are certain tools that he will take and utilize in operating as a crime fighter. Next up is my number 4 story by Robbie Thompson and Ramon Villalobos called Bat and Mouse, and it takes place in current continuity, cutting between the POV of Batman and Robin, Damian Wayne, to contrast their individual perspectives on not only their relationship as the dynamic duo, but as father and son. And just as this story cuts between POVs in the visual sense, the internal monologues of both characters are also juxtaposed throughout this story. And it begins while Batman is trailing Damian out of fear that he's hiding something, and Damian's internal monologue expresses that he feels that there's a lack of trust in their relationship, also outlining his aggressive program to mind wipe criminals and send them to the suburbs for working menial jobs. Batman catches up with his son to request a discussion, and he follows him on a case to discover thieves of a powerful AI. All the while, their internal monologues are juxtaposed against one another, highlighting their conflicting mindsets. As they beat their way through Quietus's AI minions, Damian's monologue expresses that his father's methods are ineffective and lack the proper follow-through to get the job done, and this almost kind of circles back to kind of earlier character traits with Damian when he was first introduced to the Bat family. In contrast, Batman's monologue conveys the desire to try and understand his son and to break down this wall of secrets that he'd been told he once had. And eventually this leads them both to consider that they've taken the wrong approach. Damian soon gets overwhelmed after jumping into the fight against Batman's warning, but just before it's too late, Batman hails the Batmobile through the building, toppling over a majority of the robot army. We pick back up with Quietus and his robot armada defeated. The mirrored internal monologues of Batman and Robin both express a desire to open up to one another, but their reclusive natures take hold as they part ways. And as this issue closes out, Batman reveals that he suspects Damian is hiding something from him and realizes that he needs to approach whatever happens next as a father, not as Batman. This is the big central thrust of the theme in this story. And Damian's final monologue, in contrast, indicates his lack of self-esteem in the eyes of his father and fears disappointing him further if he were to ever find out about these operations. And this, again, really assists to central themes of father and son relationship and the perspective of said relationship. And it's very clear that both of them are very much alike, but to that same degree, those alike traits are causing them to drift apart because of their not only reclusive nature, but their lack of communication. Because at the core, they both want the same thing. They want to mend their relationship and to become closer to one another. I think that it's very present here, and I don't know if it is just a bias because I feel unsettled at the end of the story that there wasn't much of a resolution, and that might just be because it's setting up the next story in the current Teen Titans run, I don't know. But this is kind of what puts it a little bit lower on this ranking. However, I do think that in terms of what we're doing with the character is very important here, in that Damian is a very important member of the Bat family. Although he's been in Gotham for quite a few years now, I still think that part of him not feeling at one with that familiar relationship is what drives him to be a little bit more on the obnoxious side and to feel distance from the group and, by translation, his father. The art by Ramon Villalobos is fine. It feels a little bit like Discount Frank Quitely, if I'm to be quite frank with you, but I definitely don't mind it. I think the character acting was fine, and the page layouts were pretty normal. And so next up is my number 3 story, Boy Wonders by James Tynion IV and Javier Fernandez. And this story picks up just before James Tynion's Detective Comics Rebirth run, as Tim Drake juggles the chance to attend an Ivy University or to join Batman in his crusade. And throughout the story, Tim brings his dilemma to Robin's past and present, looking for advice. Each of these conversations serve as not only a lens into Tim's relationship with each one of them, but also means to reevaluate Tim's current dilemma and his character. As expected, he begins with Nightwing, Dick Grayson, the original Robin. Through their time together beating down some unnamed thugs, Tim reflects on Dick as a huge role model for him, having been not only the first Robin, but the founder of the Titans and the first sidekick to make a name for himself. According to Dick, Tim is a born leader, and he has a responsibility to be that to the new generation of heroes coming down the pipeline. What I love about this focus is that Nightwing is a true role model for Tim, and yet they are two very, very different characters. And I think that having that older brother relationship with Dick has kind of allowed him to open up and retain some qualities from Dick. What's important to note here is that Dick Grayson has become a role model for Tim Drake over the years, and he's kind of cast his own shadow just as much as there is the shadow of the Bat kind of looming over everybody. It's important to pay attention here that Tim Drake has a very different path up until this point than the rest of the Robins. He's not driven by tragedy, not by obligation, but by desire to do the right thing. And so we're going to be moving on to the next Robin, Jason Todd, Red Hood. And due to his tumultuous relationship with the Bat family, Jason feels ill-equipped to advise Tim on what his next move should be. However, he does make a point to note that he thinks the experience of continuing to work with Batman is worth it. Jason exhibits an unapologetic admiration for Batman here, valuing him as the best to ever do it, and yet imparts on Tim the importance to find flaws in Batman's operation, strip them down, and aim to be better than him. Which is an interesting perspective because although he and Dick have both given Tim the direction to fight this crusade with Batman, they take entirely different approaches. And I think it's really important because this story also exhibits the lessons in which and the morality by which Batman has instilled in his surrogate sons. The final advisor in Tim's journey here is the current Robin, son of Batman, Damian Wayne. And Damian begins as expected, seemingly berating Tim and antagonizing him as just being the other one. He's not the golden child, he's not the black sheep, he's not the blood heir apparent, but surprisingly, Damian provides what might be the most sound advice. And he notes that Tim has done some really incredible things in his tenure as Robin. And with that, he shouldn't be looking for an invitation at a clear path to his future. And according to Damian himself, he has to cut it out for himself and do as he damn well pleases. Really, what I love about this is not only Damian's characterization, but it puts emphasis on the central thrust of Tim Drake's time as Robin. Like I said before, he wasn't birthed by tragedy. He's the only one that strove to be Robin out of sheer will. And he paved himself a clear path to be Robin then, and he owes it to himself to do that once again. As this story closes, he decides to agree to become part of Batman's new organization, presenting him with the Gotham Knights protocol that led into the Detective Comics Rebirth run. And I really enjoy this story not only as an outlet to show their relationships, but the very different perspectives on what it means to be a part of this kind of crime-fighting organization and to have lived that sort of life. Obviously, all of the Robins have very different experiences and backgrounds, but I think it's important to explore them, especially in context with their individual relationships with Tim. Dick Grayson is the role model, Jason Todd is the black sheep, angry big brother, and Damian Wayne is the surprisingly mature, antagonistic little brother. The art by Javier Fernandez was really good. I enjoyed a lot of the panel layouts because it made a lot of the figures really pop. He wasn't afraid to let character figures break outside of panel borders, and it makes this story feel really full of motion, and I enjoyed that a lot. James Tynion does a good job, like I said, with his grasp on the central theme, but not only that, the voicing of these characters, and I think that he gives each of them their own little spotlight within the time that he gives them, but centrally keeps the focus on Tim Drake and his importance as Robin. Next up is a story that I absolutely adore, and I think it's one that a lot of us out there were looking forward to, and it was My Best Friend by Peter Tomasi and Jorge Jimenez, featuring the Super Sons. And this is perhaps the most unique story, as it's not told from the POV of the Robin, but rather of John Kent's perspective of him as he writes a school paper about his best friend. And this story is almost completely absent of plot, which allows us to take a full exploration of the character through John's narration and his memories juxtaposed in between. John reflects on his relationship with Damian and how it felt like they jumped right into the best parts of friendship. They've been through a lot together, and through his paper he notes how they've grown more by experiencing things together than they would have if they were alone. He continues describing Damian as, in one word, dependable. John says that when the chips are stacked, not only can he trust Damian, but he knows that Damian has his back and will take care of him. In closing, he reflects on how, although he is an only child, he's found brotherhood in Damian. And as the story comes to a close, John Kent falls asleep while writing his paper and feels a tap on his shoulder from Damian as he's reading the letter. Damian then proposes that they go out for a late night stroll, and the story ends. This story was really touching because it really contradicts the young boy's typical refusal to be emotionally open. And although we've always known that these two characters share a very special and particular bond, they never stated expressly due to the nature of being young boys. And I think one of the strengths of this story is that it's not super explicit and it's not really articulate in the sense of how John is narrating it here because he's a child. And Tomasi does a really good job at capturing these characters' voices, namely in this story John here, because it is entirely different for somebody so young to try to explain these really complex feelings. And with that being said, I think it was done exceptionally well by being juxtaposed against Jorge Jimenez's wonderful art. There's something about that panel with a roughed up Damian standing in front of a pretty sorely beaten John that I thought was really, really emotionally strong, and it pulled me right into their relationship, even though I haven't read the two together in quite a while. This was an awesome story, and it really highlights Damian Wayne's impact on the DCU, namely his best friend John. With that being said, I don't think Damian gets a lot of credit by the larger comic book audience, and I think he very much deserves it because he started out in his debut as a really obnoxious, ruthless, murderous character, and at this point in continuity, it's really great that John describes him as dependable because it shows so much growth. Even at the beginning of the original Super Son series, you can find kind of Damian Wayne ducking out every time John Kent turns a shoulder, and that is the exact opposite of dependable. And so I really love the amount of development that's being shown here through the eyes of Jonathan Kent. Coming in with the final story, and at my number one spot for this anthology book, is More Time by Judd Winnick and Dustin Nguyen featuring Jason Todd. And it begins with Jason sprinting atop the roofs of Gotham until he reaches an alleyway, which I think is the alleyway where he had originally met Batman as he was trying to steal the tires off of the Batmobile. And the story frequently cuts back to the Batcave many years ago as a narrative device to push the theme forward. And as the Batmobile arrives in the alley in the present, a young Jason Todd hands Batman Bruce Wayne a present, namely a birthday present, which turns out to be his father's watch. We soon learn that Jason's motive for nabbing Bruce's father's watch was to repair it for him, and according to Alfred, he'd been working on it for months. As a young Jason Todd continues on about the difficulties of reassembling the watch, in present day, Jason descends from the rooftop and drops a small gift box in front of the Batmobile. Young Jason makes a point that he's still working on the intricacies of the watch and asks Bruce if he might be able to hold on to it for him a little while longer until it's officially done. Bruce obliges him, and while in the present, Batman opens a small gift box, revealing his father's watch inside from all those years ago. In a series of panels that cut back and forth between past and present, Bruce thanks Jason for his gift, as Jason Todd, both as Robin, current Red Hood, and surrogate son, wishes him a happy birthday. Now this story, I think, was so special. And I'll say one quick thing that changes the entire ballgame, in that Jason Todd is the watch. Jason constantly fixing himself for Bruce to obtain some level of approval from his surrogate father is one of the biggest character traits throughout seeing Jason Todd since his return as Red Hood. And there are a couple very specific lines here that really reference this and really push the metaphor of Jason's growth and relationship with Bruce as his surrogate father. There are a couple moments where Jason, obviously mentions that the watch is starting to be fixed, and that represents the young Jason as Robin trying to become something different in the eyes of his surrogate father, trying to become Robin, something that is totally removed from the street rat that was trying to steal wheels off the Batmobile. And you go into little notes where Jason mentions that you have to keep the watch by you at all times or else it won't work because it was originally not an automatic watch. And obviously Jason taking the watch back to fix it, to make it perfect, to grow, it was kind of his personal desire to become the best possible person that he can in the eyes of Bruce Wayne Batman. And because Jason has really taken the time over the years to both fix himself as a person and the watch, it's really touching when he finally gives Bruce the watch on his birthday again. Just showing this, not necessarily completion, but it really shows a definite amount of growth as he feels ready to reapproach his father in an entirely different way. Because and the thing that really makes this important to me is because I've always felt that all of the Bat family are Bruce's kids, and I think that there is a very essential paternal relationship and role that Bruce serves in each of their lives, whether or not their parents are alive or not. And especially with Jason having that kind of more abandoned and abused upbringing, I think that he would really cling to a figure like Bruce. And as much as in most continuity Jason lashes out, I think that the relationship that he has with Bruce is very, very important. And Jason's desire to grow, and shown really, really expertly well by Judd Winnick in the story, by using the watch as that metaphorical figure, I think was really, really strong. And it also kind of exemplifies how fleeting time is and how important it is to mend the bonds while you can. So yeah, I thought this story was absolutely touching, and it is the only story that I think I would give an absolute 10 out of 10 to. It was emotional, it made me tear up, and I don't even think I can properly articulate to you guys here just how good this story was in a moderate amount of time, and really properly dig into all the intricacies that really pushed the thematic thrust of this story and why it was made so important. Dustin Nguyen's art was absolutely spectacular. It really evoked a very specific tone, and the colorist, John Cleese, does an excellent job using variable color palettes between the past and the present. It was just altogether a spectacular story, and I can't sing its praises enough. Another thing I really want to bring up is how smart the pacing was in the story, and the juxtaposition between the perfect moments in the past and present to really push the narrative of this story. It was really, really smartly done, and there was a lot of resonance between this important moment in the past and this resolution here in the present day. So with all that being said, I want to make sure to give you guys a chance to win a free physical copy of the Robin 80th Spectacular, courtesy of my sponsor, AJ's Comics in Colchester, Connecticut. I really want to put a special push out there to you guys to support your local comic book store during this really crazy time and the shutdown of distribution in any way you can. I know it's tough on everybody. But the cool thing about my sponsor and my LCS in particular is that by subscribing to their comic book pull list, which you can manage completely online, you can also save 10% off everything in the store, which is really, really cool. So on top of that, if you'd like to, he'll ship your comics to you, and for all orders $100 or more, the shipping is absolutely free no matter where in the United States. And even if you're one of the wonderful men and women serving our countries overseas on a military base, he can ship it there with the free shipping still applying. It's an absolutely awesome store. All of our local comic book stores need help now more than ever. So if you would do me a favor, check out my awesome shop. Consider subscribing if you don't have a local comic book store to yourself, and support an awesome shop. I would totally appreciate it. So please make sure to go check them out. Link to their Twitters down below as well as their website. And with that being said, in order for you to be able to enter in for a free copy, this one in particular, the Jim Lee cover, we're going to need to hit 30 likes within the first 3 days. So please make sure to like this video. You have to be subscribed to my channel down below, and comment letting me know who your favorite Robin is and why, as we're talking about the celebration of the mantle of Robin. Doing all of those things will enter you in for a chance, and please, if you would, share this video with your friends and anybody who might enjoy it. That way we can continue to build a bigger and bigger community of great comic book fans. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and this has been another episode of Comics Insider on Dark Knight Nation.